Hi, my name is Dr. Emma and I'm one of the co-founders of the House of Medics. In this video, I'm going to be talking about toxic cultures within medical school. So I have a feeling that those of you who are maybe in medical school or have completed medical school, when I said toxic culture, you were like, yeah, and you had a bit of a shudder. But those of you who are maybe thinking about becoming doctors, who hope to one day go to medical school, you're probably wondering, what am I talking about? And I would definitely recommend or encourage you to listen to this video, because it may be that once at some point down the line you will experience these things, and you remember that there was a girl called Dr. Emma on YouTube one day who spoke about these things, and the things that I say might help you a little. So what do I mean when I say toxic cultures within medical school? There are certain things that medical students do, and there's a certain vibe that we create sometimes just because of, little stresses that we put on ourselves, or sometimes we like to undercut ourselves because it can be quite a competitive environment. And that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. So medical school is such an interesting place. I started I went to Imperial College London. I started in 2009. I'm from a very small town called Basingstoke. I lived there my whole life, and then I moved to London to start university. So you can imagine big city, a big university, prestigious university, and you can sort of feel a bit lost. Now, in my classes in school and in college, there's up to 30, I think between 20 to 30 people in each of my classes. My teachers knew me first name basis, and of course, if I can just be plain enough to say this, those of us that become doctors were obviously well-performing students. So many of us were probably top of the class. Maybe we were head boy or head girl or class prefect or whatever. Usually, well liked by our teachers, who at least did well in things like maths and science and things like that. So usually, we're high achievers amongst that small group of 20 or 30. So I remember I've now started medical school. There's 300 of us in a year. The lectures are 1 hour long. And I've just been like, okay, so even if I don't understand something, I can't even just raise my hand and ask. I'm going to have to wait until the end, pluck up the courage to go to the front of the class and ask this well-renowned lecturer, what he or she meant. And I found it so daunting. I found the whole, the first maybe half of the first year of medical school really, really difficult. And it was a lot to take in, because I was literally like, wow, so I'm not the best anymore, I'm average. And like I said, if I can be, plain and bold enough to say this, many of us that went to medical school, we were the best in our year. And often we were the best for, several years, maybe all the way from primary school to college, maybe. I think that was the case for myself, if I can just be bold enough to say that. So all of a sudden, I'm in a class of 300 and I'm just average. Like I said, I came from a small town. So my year, we have people who have gone to private schools, who maybe have had scholarships. We even got people who have done degrees before coming to study medicine. And I'm just here, 18-year-old Emma, small town girl, in this big city, in this big class. And it was the first time that I felt for a long time I'd been in a class and not understood something, and for those of you who've been to medical school, the first few terms are very science-based, so like very molecular, biochemistry, genetics, things like that. And I was just like, this is so complicated. I struggled to even listen for an hour straight, because usually in college your lessons are shorter. So I really struggled. And then, so you can imagine, off the back of that, they now create this competitive environment. I remember so clearly, within the first few weeks of medical school, one of our lecturers said, look to your left, look to your right. Those people that are around you, they won't finish. Not all of them will finish with you. Basically saying that, look, you guys think you're here to become doctors. Not all of you are going to be doctors. Not all of you are going to make it, because it's difficult. So from a very, early stage, they start to sow these seeds. And I think that a lot of that, coupled with the problems that I face, that I know a lot of other people face as well, where all of a sudden you realize you're average, you're not special anymore. That kind of, it turns people a certain way. Coupled with those seeds of competitiveness that have been sown, there are certain cultures that develop out of that. Now, before I even talk a bit more about that culture and specifically, I will speak about culture in itself. Now, the reason culture is so important to understand is that culture determines your behavior and the behavior of those around you without even realizing, right? So for example, like when you put your socks on in the morning, you only feel the sensation of the socks for maybe 1 minute max, often a lot less. But you know, at 3 p.m. you don't suddenly remember that you're wearing socks. No, your socks are just on. It's that process of habituation. For anyone who remembers learning that in A-level biology, you're just wearing the socks. You don't think about, oh yeah, like I can feel the sensation of my sock. You don't. And that's what culture is like. You create this environment around you, or an environment is created for you. Sometimes you don't even have a say in what that environment is like, and then you start to operate in it and behave according to it. And if you don't actually, you know, stand up one day and confront that culture, you end up becoming a product. You know, they say you're a product of your environment, right? That's all down to culture and the culture that's created around you. And in a lot of places in medical school, you know, I would see toxic things. So I think I'm in a very privileged, I'm slightly privileged because our year was quite a special year. So even when we were graduating, I know that, you know, our lecturers said this was a really different year because we all really actually got along. We were really kind to each other. We all used to study together. We used to share our notes. There wasn't too much, you know, snaky behavior, but I know that a lot of it goes on. And when I finished my foundation years, when I finished my first 2 years of being a doctor, I actually went back to teach. I then took a job as a teacher at a university to teach medical students, and I saw that behavior so much, and I saw just how anxious my students were about things that they didn't even have to worry about for another 5 years. So maybe they're in 3rd year of medical school and they're thinking about registrar applications, and I'm like, you know, it's good to be forward thinking, but sis, don't lose sleep over it now. You've still got so long before you get to that stage. And that anxiety, you know, those worries are created by that toxic culture that their year group had. So I'll give you a few examples. I used to study a lot in the library. I used to like being in the library, especially, you know, in 1st year when you live on campus, the library's close by, it's 24 hours, you can stay behind and study. But soon I realized that a few days before an exam, I have to just hide, because someone will just come and say, I heard that this lecture's coming up, and it'll be the most insignificant lecture. It'll be like one slide. You know, there are some slides in lectures you know you don't have to focus on. Sis will come and tell you that, I've heard that you're gonna get asked a lot of questions about this particular slide from this random lecture, so make sure you learn it. And every time people said that to me, that stuff never came up. And I remember the first time someone did that to me, it was 1st year, it was the night before an exam. Someone said, no, you've been studying for the exam wrong. You need to study this way. I remember I stayed up all night. I went to the exam. That stuff that person told me to stay up and study didn't come up. And I felt physically sick in the exam hall because I hadn't slept all night. And that's no way to sit an exam. So from that, I just realized people just talk. Sis, you're not on the exam board. You weren't part of the question writing committee. So why do you have so much chest to tell me about what's going to be on the exam? But I've realized that people do this, and I don't think that they're necessarily evil people, but people have their own anxieties about what might come up, and then they project them onto you. So that whole culture of anxiety, of you know, literally killing yourself, you know, depriving yourself of sleep unnecessarily. And I say unnecessarily because I had studied, you know, I had been studying consistently. There was no need for me to stay up, you know, all night before going to an exam in the morning. Those kind of things, you know, that irrational behavior comes from culture that people create. And like I said, the most dangerous, the scariest thing about culture is that you end up operating and living according to it without having a say, because of the culture that's created around you, and because you have to survive in that environment, you just live according to it without even realizing. And sometimes you never even confront or bat an eyelid, or even just take a step back to analyze the way in which you are living. And it's so dangerous. You know, the other thing we see so much is, you know, colleagues saying things like, I'm doing the project with this lecturer, I'm going to get it published, That is great. Like, I'm really happy for you, sis, but not everybody does that. I'm certainly not trying to come against excellence. I think it's really great. I love seeing when medical students are motivated, they want to push themselves. I'm certainly not coming against excellence in any way, but often I get people messaging me on social media like, Dr. Emma, are there any projects I can do? I want to do project. And I'm like, okay, what are you interested in? And they're like, nothing in particular. I just want to do project. And when you speak to people, you realize that it's actually just anxiety. Is somebody has told them that you need to do this project, otherwise you're not going to get the job that you want, blah, 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 blah. And it's most of the time, there's just no need for that. And I feel like I can say this boldly because I've, managed to be kind to people, to not undercut people, and still end up doing what I want to do. In medical school, of course, you get, when you apply for your doctor job, so at a final year before you become a doctor, you'll apply for certain jobs and you get ranked according to, in some way. In my university, it was centiles. So if you're the top 10% in the year, you're the first centile. If you're the second, if you're second 10%, then you're the second centile, etc., etc. And I know people used to say so much stuff like, you're never going to get to stay in London if you're not first or second centile. People say you're never going to be a surgeon if you don't do an academic foundation program. Those things help. Being first or second centile, of course it will help, but it's not the be all and end all. That doesn't mean you should go and kill yourself to make sure you're first centile. You should do your best. You strive for excellence, but you don't have to go and literally work yourself to a crisp to the point of burning out, and you certainly don't have to undercut people in order to get there. So I've heard stories like someone wrote notes and they don't want to share their notes, they don't want to study in groups. I love studying in groups. I feel like when you can teach a friend or colleague, that proves to yourself that you've learnt it, right? You can only teach something that you understand yourself. But I've heard people who are like, I only study by myself, because if I study with somebody, that person may benefit from my knowledge. That's just crazy. It's just completely unnecessary. It's crazy. I've seen people who, specifically keep themselves to themselves, or they make sure they don't have friends on their course. They, if you're studying medicine, they'll go and, make friends with mathematicians. Why? Why create this sort of terrible culture that's only going to lead to heartache at the end? And the worst thing about it is, at the time, your 18, 19-year-old self may think that is so important, like this one exam is the end of your life. But trust me, when you're 40 years old, even when you're 30 years old, even when you're 25 years old, you're not going to remember how important, the way you felt so passionate about that exam at that time is not going to be the same way. And please, I will keep putting in the caveat, I'm not trying to discourage excellence. Everyone must do their best. You're in medical school for a short amount of time. You must, give it all that you have. But it does come to a place when it becomes unhealthy. Now, I always say that the world is looking for leaders. The world needs leaders. Not everybody can be a leader, but the world needs leaders. And I feel like it just needs a few more medical students to stand up and say, I'm just not going to do that stuff. So for example, if nobody else is sharing their notes, if I know I've written good notes, I'm going to deliberately go out my way and send it to my colleagues, because I wrote the notes. I don't have anything to lose. Somebody can't be better, get better than me using my notes. I wrote them. So, I have nothing to lose by sharing them. Similarly, if I have good projects, it's not that I'm now going to hide the project from my colleagues. If I know that somebody else has similar interest to me, bring them in, let them do the project with you, and you don't know that just by taking those little steps to, behave differently, to be a leader and to say, I'm not subscribing to that culture. I'm going to set my own culture, which is open, which is inviting, which is encouraging and inspiring to those around me. That is a snowball effect, right? So as you start to behave a certain way, other people behave a certain way. And before you know it, a larger and larger group are just more receptive. And before you know it, it just creates a happier environment for all. Culture is so important, and the problem is many of us just live in it without addressing it, without ever confronting it and be like, actually, why do we do that? Why do we not just share? Why, why do we... I've heard stories of someone, if the lecturer mentions a certain textbook that you need, someone will go and take out all the textbooks in the library so no one else can get it. Why? Are you so insecure? And often it is a thing of maybe imposter syndrome, insecurities and anxiety. So often it just needs that one person that decides that they're going to be different to reach out to the person and be like, bro, can I use one of the books? I've got some notes. Maybe I can send you my notes. Maybe we can study sometime. Extend that hand of kindness and you'd be surprised how far it can go. Like I said, I'm in a privileged position because I really had a great year group, sorry. Obviously we all had our, smaller friendship groups, but as a whole, we were very warm and inviting, very encouraging. And I've done what I've wanted to do. People told me for the longest, dermatology is so competitive, you're never gonna get in. And it is, I understand that it's competitive, but I'm here and I didn't have to snake anybody to get here. I've just been consistent, I've helped people. If I've had opportunities and I thought that it would suit someone else that I know, I bring them in because I don't lose anything by sharing with someone else. If anything, they might help me with the workload and then we can get it done easier, and the next time they have an opportunity, they might bring me in. I'm such a strong advocate for sharing in medicine. And actually, I said I'm talking about toxic cultures in medical school. This thing still exists as a doctor, unfortunately, all the way up from F1, F2, SHO jobs to registrar jobs. It still continues, but I deliberately set that culture everywhere I go. Everywhere I go, I'm deliberately very open and I have zero tolerance for that behavior. People know you can't come and whisper to me, oh, like, let's do a project and not tell anybody. I'm gonna deliberately just go and tell everyone, because it's just so counterproductive. And when you share, I don't believe that I've missed out on any opportunity because I was too open or too inviting or too kind. We're doctors at the end of the day. We're meant to be compassionate people. So you can't tell me that you've got compassion for patients, but you can't be kind to your colleagues. That doesn't make any sense. So this video was just to call out certain things in the medicine that people don't talk about. These are the kind of conversations I have with my mentees. I always say to them, in terms of the medicine, you're going to learn that regardless. You will pass your exams, you will be fine in the end. But this is the stuff that nobody's going to tell you, or this is the stuff that people don't talk about enough. And I feel like for many of us, if you go straight into medicine, you decided you wanted to be a doctor at the age of 16, but you don't know that you've also chosen your employer for at least the next, maybe 5 to 10 years. We're all going to work in the NHS for a while, if not much longer. You don't realize that you've chosen probably, a certain type of lifestyle, all these things that, they don't tell you in medical school. You just sort of find yourself there. So in terms of culture, confront it, analyze it. Don't just behave a certain way because everyone else around you does it. Actually sit down and think, what has inspired that behavior? Why have I done that? Or why do I feel this way towards that person? Sometimes it's just the culture that you're living in, which is really toxic and really counterproductive. And sometimes it just takes you to be that leader and to just think differently, to just go out of your way to do something different. And you'd be surprised, that ripple effect can affect your whole environment around you. So I hope that this has encouraged someone. If you feel like, sometimes you're burning out because you're listening to too many people, trust me, it's not just you. It happens a lot. It happens all the time. I'm always more than happy to hear from you. You can contact me via the House of Medics page. You can drop us an email or a DM on any of our social media platforms. If you ask specifically for me, that message will work its way towards me and we can talk about this more, because I know it's a big problem. Medical school should be the most enjoyable part of your life, and for me it was great. I really enjoyed my time at medical school. I made some really close friends, but I know that some people leave it just feeling so exhausted and so burnt out and so unhappy. But a lot of that can be avoided if we address things like this. So yeah, if you're struggling with anything like that, reach out to me via the House of Medics page, or just chat to your friends and maybe say, can we change things? Can we be a bit different? Just stand up as a leader. The world is looking for leaders. The world needs leaders. I tell everybody around me that. You've just got to be the one that's daring enough to behave differently, and you'd be surprised how much of a difference you can make. So I hope this has helped someone. Check out the rest of our videos and make sure you're subscribing to House of Medics on all our various platforms, and stay in touch.